to Spiro Avenue. It's been a weird year in everyone's life, and I can't believe we are actually on the eve of another hockey season. But check the calendar. It is, in fact, true. We are on the eve of another hockey season. Maybe not such a good thing for a lot of Red Wings fans if you're not a glutton for punishment. It's been a rough few years, and I anticipate that'll continue. But I'm going to get some more clarity on that for you and for everybody else in our wonderful audience, because I have right across from me the best hockey writer in the state of Michigan, Max Bultman from The Athletic. Max, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. It's very nice of you to say. I appreciate being here. This is a pretty unbelievable studio you got.
I appreciate it. I know you're a Michigan guy, so I hope I don't offend your senses too much. Your skin isn't burning or anything like that. So I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, ever since you came into the market, and a big supporter of The Athletic and everything that you guys do. And I think your coverage has been top-notch. So I'm hoping you can help me make some sense of what this team is doing, where they're going. I'm still not sure exactly what's going on with the rebuild. I know I do trust the man in charge. So you wrote a really good article about a week ago now outlining what does a good season look like for Detroit. No one is going to say they're winning the Cup. I don't know really anybody in my circle that's saying that they're even going to make the playoffs. So you talked about it in your article. Tell our audience, what does a good season look like? What's successful for them?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you know the state that they're in, right? They're in a years-long rebuild that is not ending this year. It is not ending next year. And so you have to kind of figure out what are the things that they need to actually accomplish. And there are some things that are obvious. They need their young prospects to play well. They need their young players to play well. And they need to draft well. I think those all go without saying. You will not win if you do not do those things well in the NHL, or at least you won't win for very long. But those things aside, I tried to figure out what are the things that the NHL team can do this season that you can look back on and say, those are important things that they did this year. And really got in my head what it came down to is they need to undo last year and get back to where they were in 2018-19, where they were a bad team. They were not a miserable, disastrous team. They lost a lot of games by 1 goal. They did not lose a lot of games by 3, 4, 5 goals. And as you know, that happened a ton last year. I think they lost 30 games by 3 or more goals.
It's the most embarrassing team I've ever seen in that organization's history by far, and it's arguably, other than the 0-16 Lions, the worst team, period, in Detroit that I've seen in my lifetime.
Well, what I think went wrong for them is that you look at those two teams, I'm talking about 2018-19 and 2019-20, the roster's not that different. I don't think Gus Nyquist makes that difference, right? Gus Nyquist, Nick Jensen were the two big guys who were on the 18-19 team, not on the 19-20 team, right? So what were the big differences? They seem to not be able to stop the bleeding. They seem to let 1 goal turn into 2 or 3 goals in a 4 or 5 minute span on the ice. And they seem to let 1 loss, 2 loss turn into 4, 5, 6 loss. So that to me is the number one thing that needs to be different this year. And I think they would agree with that. I think anyone in that locker room could tell you that things spiraled for them last year. I think there's a lot of not only good players who are better than they showed last year, but good guys in that locker room who I think could tell you that when it got bad, it got really bad, and there's correctable things they can do different. And so, to me, I just tried to look out, look around the league, and on the note of how much they're losing by, I just said basically go back to the same ratio you were losing by in 18-19. Easier said than done from my perch, obviously. I don't have to go out on the ice and do it against NHL players. And then I said, for the losing streaks, mimic the team that better than any other team in the NHL, in my opinion, doesn't let it spiral despite not having elite talent. There's very few teams in the NHL who, without elite talent, are really in it, like the Minnesota Wild are. They've got great blue line. Ryan Suter is one of the best of the generation as a defenseman. I really like Jonas Brodin. Matt Dumba's great. Jared Spurgeon, the perpetually underrated Jared Spurgeon. Great blue liners. They're better than the Red Wings, no doubt. But they managed to keep their losing streaks very short. They very rarely had a long losing streak, more than 2 or 3 games. They were able to come back and battle. And that's the kind of character that I think the Red Wings want to build. And I think it's the kind of character they need to build, because when they get this thing back on the upswing, I think we can say right now they're at the bottom. Hard to go any lower, right? When they get back on the upswing, adversity is going to come again. It doesn't work like you have your good years, then you slide a little bit, then you have your bad years, and then it's just better and better and better, and it's parties, right?
It's not perfectly linear.
Not at all.
Right.
So even when you look at the teams that everyone remembers from their youth as the great Red Wings teams, well, what were the Red Wings known for before they did it in 96, 97? They couldn't quite get there, right? The adversity kept coming. So you build that identity now of a team that can respond to adversity and you can make your way. It doesn't mean you're going to be immune from it when you do get into the playoffs. It doesn't mean you're not going to lose in the first 2 rounds, the first couple of times. That probably will happen. But if you get used to being able to rebound now, it just sets you up so much better organizationally. It's a better development. We talked about that at the beginning of this, right? The development that they need from their young players creates a better environment for development because it doesn't wear on guys like it does when you're coming into the locker room after your 5th straight loss, your 6th straight loss. And oh, by the way, it's your 3rd 6-game losing streak in the last 2 months, right? Like anybody in any profession, I think, can relate that when it's hitting you hard like that, that's not easy to just, summon the morale to then do a great job the next night. It gets harder. I think it compounds with how difficult it gets to play well, let alone to win. When it's happening like that.
And you can't conjure up the enthusiasm. I mean, they are humans at the end of the day. I do think your answer really lays out how bad things are.
Sure.
Because if you back up, and first of all, I don't disagree with anything you said. I think you nailed it in your article, and I think you just nailed it outlining it now. But the 2 sort of pillars that you just talked about are lose by 1 goal instead of 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. Still lose, but just lose less badly.
Well, less often, too, yeah.
Well, and less often, but you also said, I'm not disagreeing with
you.
No,
you're fine. You're fine.
I'm just saying, and the second pillar is, lose 3 and 4 in a row instead of 5 or 6. So this is sort of, and you're not wrong, but it just shows that this team is so far off. The fact that they've had absolutely no luck in the lottery is there's nothing you can do. I mean, as short of being into the conspiracy realm, which I'm not.
No, yeah.
So it's like, we're not lunatics on this show anyway, not in that regard. There's nothing you can do about that. Certainly would help, but as bad as things have been, I want to pivot to this. Jeff Blashill has been here for about, half a decade now? Mm-hmm. That's a long time. I've always said the same thing I said about Ron Gardenhire with the Tigers, that I don't know how I'm supposed to sit here and assess the job when it's a job that nobody could do well. Ron Gardenhire, it doesn't matter. A.J. Hinch in the past few years, Joe Torre in his prime with the Yankees, doesn't matter. Tigers were going to be bad because their roster was totally inept. I think it's similar with the Red Wings where I don't know to what extent the best coach in hockey, whomever you think that is, would have made that much of a difference. But at the same time, I'm surprised a little bit that Jeff Blashill is still here. And I'm a gambling guy, Max. So we pulled the odds. And I'm going to have Ben throw it up there for our viewing audience from Bet Online.
Jimmy Shapiro season.
This is, excuse me, sir, the NHL coach is most likely to be fired. Jeff Blashill at number 1. 8-1, and then for the people that are just listening, Rick Tocchet, Arizona 9-1, Paul Maurice 10-1, and then it just goes on and on. But Blashill is the odds-on favorite. This was as of 4 or 5 days ago on Bet Online, and this is OddsShark has something, Bovada has something. He's the odds-on most likely first coach to be fired. I'm surprised. Why do you think they retained him, and did you agree with the decision to retain him?
I did, for a couple of reasons. I think number one, you brought up, how hard it is to really assess the job someone's doing. Jeff Blashill's really well regarded among coaches around the league, and I know there is a degree where coaching, like any other kind of, there's not many of these jobs. Like there is, I guess, sort of an allegiance among coaches to not, drag each other, and I can't understand people having skepticism around it. But he's a guy that USA Hockey's hired to coach their World Championship team multiple times. He's a guy who's won at every other level until he got to the NHL. He's earned a lot of benefit of the doubt, and I can understand Red Wings fans feeling like, okay, well, where does that end? But it is a thing where I can understand it. If you have a guy who has come up through your system, because he came up as an assistant and then in Grand Rapids and he won in Grand Rapids, and then he came up and, it hasn't worked yet. But I would point to, I looked this up a few months ago, the stats on his first season as head coach and the top 5 or 6 scorers. I think all 5 are gone, but it might be 4 of the top 5. I don't know if Dylan was in there yet in his first season, right? But it is like, it's not just that he got there and they haven't gone up. It's that the top 5 or it might even be 6, I don't know how many it was, but they're all gone. So it's not just that he couldn't build something, they gave him pieces, make it work, it didn't happen. It's that they were subtracting every step of the way, right? Like it's you're building something and every step someone's pulling one of those little Jenga tiles or whatever. That's and right. You're like, how am I supposed to keep this from falling, right? So there's that. And people can have different opinions on him as a developer. I understand him. The Dennis Chalowski one is the one people will bring up all the time. Has he been developed perfectly? But I think you can just as easily say, I think Blashill's been the only pro coach for Dylan Larkin, Anthony Mantha, Tyler Bertuzzi, Filip Hronek. Filip Hronek had some time in Grand Rapids, so Todd Nelson and Ben Simon get some time there. Zadina, same deal, but NHL coach. So if you're happy with those guys' development, and by the way, from what I understand, I've not been on the beat the entire time those guys were coming up, but from what I understand, there were similar contentious debates going on around ice time usage for some of those guys as well.
Oh yeah, well that's been going on,
right?
Yeah, forever,
and it will for every NHL team. Red Wings fans are not unique in this.
Exactly.
Everyone wants to see their young guys, and they want to see them now, and they want to see them succeed now. But I think, again, at every other level until this, it's worked. And when you look at the individual players who are supposed to be building around here, it's mostly worked. Evgeny Svechnikov, weird situation, injuries seeming to derail him every year or every other year. Michael Rasmussen, I think it's debatable. We'll see what happens there.
He's a big lug. He's going to do nothing. And I don't put that on Blashill either, by the way.
Well,
I'm putting that on Ken Holland.
Well, I mean, you can debate like the upside for sure, but I'm also think like Michael Rasmussen could be a useful NHL player because of what he can give you on both special teams, right? Like even if it's just that, and that's not what you want at 10th overall.
No
one's saying that.
Power play specialist,
but penalty kill, power play. Can he be a good defensive center? No one's trying to draft a third liner at 9th overall. I get it, but if you get a good one, then when you're good, maybe you're still not happy about where what the resource that you used to get it was. You're probably not mad you have the player. So there's that too, but you're right. It's not really germane to the Blashill conversation. So.
I just, backing up again with Blashill, I am flabbergasted by anyone having a strong opinion either way. Because these people saying, oh, fire Blashill.
Sure.
Based on what? And the people that love him, which is it's a much smaller number, but they're out there, the Blashill defenders, it's like, well, I don't know what you can say is really good. I mean, it's like the longest incomplete grade in the history of pro sports where the guy's been here half a decade, and I still don't even know if he's a good coach or not. I mean, I'm fascinated by it.
I get it. Yeah, I mean, I get that, and I'm certainly not here to tell you that you're looking at the second coming of Scotty Bowman or anything.
But
like
you
that.
think he's solid? Do the players like him?
Well, again, similar thing here, right? What player is going to come out and say, "I don't like my coach," right? But they haven't quit on him. Like I don't think anyone can tell you they've quit. Even last year when they were getting run, it was in these little spurts mid-game that they would let 3-4 goals in 5-10 minutes, and then it wouldn't, they wouldn't get run too often 8-0 or something. There was that one game on night before Thanksgiving against Toronto that was bad. There was an 8-1 game against the Islanders that was bad, and you could tell in those locker rooms it was bad. But 18-19 at the end of the season, 19-20 at the end of the season. 18-19, they had like a 7-game win streak. They're not quitting on him. You know what I mean? Like you don't, if you don't like your coach, is that happening?
No, and that's fair. Do you agree with the assessment that he is the most likely to go first? Do you think he's that close?
No, because if last year didn't do it, losing's not going to be what does it. So the only way that he would go first is if something like really bad happened. Like I think one of these, the guy who goes first is a team that's supposed to do something. Tocchet makes sense there.
Yes.
But I like Tocchet as a coach too, right? And they went and got Kessel kind of for Tocchet because him and Tocchet click, right? Dallas Eakins in Anaheim. Again, like the guy, but Anaheim is not supposed to, I mean, they've been in the last few years one of the bottom teams, but they're a team that still should at least threaten. They've got John Gibson in that. Like they should be able to threaten to be in that 4 or 5 spot. If they start 2-10.
Right, and that's a great point. I mean, the bottom line is if you have no expectations, you can't fail to meet them. I mean,
and
that's where we're
right.
at.
And that is the frustration that I think a lot of people have is for most of us, for you or me in our day-to-day jobs, we have expectations of X, and if we don't hit X, we hear about it. Pro sports aren't like our jobs, and it's the hardest thing to understand day to day when we try to assess people, because we want, we want our prospects to develop because we're trying to groom them for the future, and so we're going to hold them to high standards, but we're not going to hold those same standards for XYZ veteran who hasn't played very well either but isn't seeing his ice time cut. What gives? That's inconsistent. Well, yeah, it is inconsistent because the motivations are inconsistent. One guy I'm trying to teach habits, one guy I'm trying to get me through the game. This is not how we operate in the real world.
No, but it's not the real world. They're incompatible.
Absolutely.
Right. Right. So I've had this discussion, and speaking of things, I have a strong opinion on almost everything, Max.
Okay.
The wings, I'm flailing, and this is where I hope you can help me. I've gone back and forth on this. I don't know whether I want them to shock the world and be competitive. We know they're not going to do anything good. But shock the world, be competitive, be competing to squeak into the playoffs. Maybe they squeak in and get blasted in the first round. Maybe they miss it by 2 points. Or just completely bottom out and, God willing, for the first time ever, not get screwed in the lottery. You're talking about culture, and you're seeing a successful step towards improvement, being more competitive, not losing so much.
Yeah.
What's better for the long-term health of this franchise right now? Being that competitive, scrappy team. We know they're not going anywhere, but maybe they finish middle of the pack, bottom third, but now they're picking 11th or 12th, or just being terrible at least one more year, and then you get a top 3 pick. Which one's better for the long-term future?
If you get the top 3 pick, it's a conversation in most years. I'd say this is an unusual year. I don't know how big of a draftnik you are.
I am, and we're going to talk about a guy from your alma mater in a second.
Is it Beniers?
Owen Power is my guy.
All right.
But, okay, there's the point.
Yeah, they got a few.
I cut you off. So, we'll throw the Owen Power highlight clip up, and then I'll let you finish.
Yeah.
But this guy, look, I'm not a scout, but Owen Power is this giant defenseman from the University of Michigan who was not getting this level of buzz like even a few months ago, but now some people are saying Owen Power, 6'5", almost 230 pounds, pretty smooth skater. Drawing comparisons to guys like Chris Pronger. High praise, but my point is if you can get that, and whether it's Power or somebody else, you can get that cornerstone. I would argue this organization doesn't have one elite prospect yet. We'll see about Lucas Raymond. He might be there. But I think they'd be better off with that type of a piece than just being scrappy and quote-unquote building the culture, and then 6 months from now they still don't have a hot young prospect.
I get it. No, and they're fair conversations to have. I'm not going to dismiss this because it's a legit conversation.
I go back and
what's
forth.
better. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'll approach it from 2 ways. Number one, just philosophically in principle. If you set up a situation where your players don't think you're trying to win, it's hard to muster that motivation to be good, and then it makes it hard for you to even know, what do I have in my team, right? And, these are wildly different sports. I love baseball. It's probably my second, or it was kind of my, it held my attention the most as a kid because you have these long summers and nothing to do, and every day there's baseball. So I've got a huge soft spot in my heart for baseball. And you look at these organizations in baseball, Pittsburgh Pirates, for example, and you got Garrett Cole. And Garrett Cole was a number 1 overall pick. And he just wasn't quite a number 1 overall pick when he was in Pittsburgh. He showed it, but it just wasn't happening. He goes to Houston, a winning culture, a winning team. And there's some analytic stuff in here. There's some, some pitching stuff especially that I think is unique to baseball. There's no doubt about it. And now Garrett Cole is a Cy Young, and he's a $40 million man or whatever the number is, and he's a guy. And I know there's actual active, scientific pitch efficiency, whatever, pitch design stuff that works here for these guys, and that's different from hockey. But I also think, you're in that situation, and how does it not, if you're a competitor, how does it not bring out the best in you that this is what it is, right? And I'm not saying, I don't want to speak for Garrett Cole. I've never spoken with Garrett Cole. I'm not trying to say that, he couldn't muster it in Pittsburgh or he couldn't have with the right coaching. But I just think, don't underestimate what being in this environment that's going to push you can do for your development of your young players. And so the acquisition side, there is no doubt. It's better to pick high than pick low, period. But it's a trade-off of once they're there, do you want them to enter an organization that when they get there, everyone's pushing each other day to day and holding each other to account day to day because the whole way they've been there, the whole way they came up, the guys ahead of them did it for them because nobody checked out, right? That matters to me, in my opinion, right? And in my own professional development, like I've got an unbelievable boss in Craig Custance who, I'm not going to say he's like on me every day to do, but he sets such a standard, right? I think he's one of the best hockey reporters in the world. And when you're looking up every day at one of the best hockey reporters in the world, and I can do it around the horn too on my company, like, we got, Mike Russo in Minnesota, Aaron Portzline in Columbus, whatever. These are your teammates, right? And they're setting this standard. Well, I got to go set that standard because I don't want to be the guy, under the Athletic bannerhead that's not doing it, right? Like, there's real value in that. And I'm not, again, my job is not like pro sports. none of our jobs
No, but you are a human being.
Exactly.
And they are human beings.
Exactly.
There's something to be said for it.
Yeah. And so I think it matters a ton for development. It matters a ton so that, when you get out of it, everyone can speculate about what went wrong in Edmonton or Buffalo. But those two teams unquestionably did exactly what we're talking about, and they hit it perfect. They got McDavid, Dahlin, Eichel, Draisaitl. How many playoff series have they won?
They haven't done anything, and they don't even make the playoffs most years.
And, they've made mistakes too. Like, it's not like, Casey Middlestat being better wouldn't have helped them, or it's not like name one of the Oilers, mistakes that couldn't have helped them, whether it's trading Taylor Hall or, I don't know, what's the guy's name?
Yakupov
yeah,
was a
Nail
huge
Yakupov, right?
bust,
Exactly.
but everyone in the whole league would
Everyone
have taken
thought he was a slam dunk.
He was the consensus.
Right? So what if you draft Yakupov this year, right?
That's the thing. I mean, and that's where I go back and forth, where obviously you said it. I mean, from a talent acquisition standpoint, it's obvious which way you'd go.
Right.
Tank Palooza, let's go.
Yeah.
But I wonder what irreparable damage you're doing to the pieces in place. And
I agree.
For most general managers, maybe I would lean a little bit more towards the I want to bottom out and pick at the top of the draft. But with Steve Yzerman, who, for my money, and you can call me a homer, Max, I don't know, maybe you agree, I think he's the best general manager in the entire league. Certainly up there if you disagree.
He's up there.
Yeah.
There's no doubt he's up there. I mean, Joe Sakic's got a great case with what he's done in Colorado.
Incredible.
I'm trying to think.
And they were in a similar doldrum. They were terrible.
Yeah.
As the Red Wings were. But he's right up there, whether you put him at 1 or 3.
Yeah.
So he's a guy where I don't need to idiot-proof the draft for him. Okay, here you go. He's the number 2 prospect consensus, and you got the number 2 pick. Nice and neat, and put a nice
draft record is not at the top of the board. I'll say that.
Okay, that's fair.
Tampa.
But in Tampa, he
later
He
rounds.
drafted one of the best players in the league in the second round. But
Right.
Absolutely. No, and that's fair. I mean, but that's everybody.
Yeah.
He has more hits than the average
It speaks
Joe.
to the randomness of the draft more than anything.
I think so. Yeah. But the point being, I trust him not to hit on every draft pick, but I trust him to hit on his fair share to where I think, honestly, you're kind of even making the point that, in the later rounds is where he's been scoring a lot, and that's sort of how the Wings made their bones. I mean, look at where Datsuk was drafted, Zetterberg was drafted, Lidstrom was drafted. None of these guys were top 10 picks.
Yes.
6th round, 7th round. And so I don't, I'm on the side, if I had to pick, I want to see them be competitive this year. But you ask me tomorrow, I might change my mind. I mean, I don't know.
Well, so here's the other side of it. Now let's talk about the practical in this year's draft, right?
Yes.
So we talked philosophical about what you want if in year X.
Right.
Talk about 2021 draft. I like Owen Power. I think he's going to be a really good player. I think he has a chance to be a great player. You mentioned Hedman. If he's Hedman, okay, well then maybe you do whatever it takes because you're going to get Hedman, who I think is the best defenseman in the NHL.
Yeah. Yes.
In my opinion, at least.
Yeah. He's top 3.
Similar deal, right? Similar to Yzerman.
Yeah.
Hedman is the Yzerman of defensemen.
Right.
Okay. So if he's Hedman, no problem. What if he's Ekblad? Number 1 overall defenseman, big, moves well, a little bit of offense, can be a shutdown guy. What if he's Ekblad? Do you tank for Ekblad?
Yes.
You do.
It's close. I like him though.
I like him.
Yeah,
he's a 1, but is he a elite 1?
It's more of a conversation. It's not Hedman. It's not obvious like Hedman.
Right.
Is.
So if he's that, I love Miro Heiskanen. I think Miro Heiskanen's going to be a top 3 to 5 defenseman in the NHL someday. If I thought Miro Heiskanen was there, you do it. Yeah, you'd be pretty tempted. Although you still can't guarantee 1. You got an 18% shot at it. This year, to me, there's 7 guys, and they might go in any order. You mentioned Owen Power. He might not even go the highest on his own team. That might be Matt Beniers. I think Power will go higher, but Matt Beniers just had a great World Juniors. He's a great two-way center. I don't know if he's going to score enough to be at the very top there, but he's a winning player. Kent Johnson, Trevor Zegras just won World Juniors MVP. Kent Johnson has kind of the hockey sense that you go, did we get kind of a mini Trevor Zegras out of Kent Johnson, right? And I'm not being a homer here. These are guys here at Michigan. These are all just Michigan players, those 3, that I think are all going to go in the top 10 to 15 picks. Then you've got, in Frölunda, who the Red Wings have turned into their prospect factory in the last couple of years. Simon Edvinsson, is he going to go that high? Carson Lambos is out west in the WHL. Luke Hughes, there's a 3rd Hughes, right? He's committed to Michigan for next year at the NTDP this year. One of the youngest players in the draft. Do you swing on his upside and say, oh, am I getting a taller Quinn? Because Luke's like 6'1" or 6'2".
We're going to get to Quinn Hughes. Hold that thought.
Yeah.
Because that's a sore subject in this office.
That's fair. But you see what I mean? So if you don't even know who you're tanking for, am I really that worried about the difference between picking 7th and 10th and 4th in this draft? I wouldn't be.
Yeah, and that's fair. Yeah. So, all right, you convinced me. You win. I might change my mind tomorrow, but I'm all for. I hope they finish around 500.
I might too.
Which would be, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I fluctuate. So this has been probably, not to put words in your mouth, I'm guessing one of the most frequent questions you're asked. If my anecdotal experience is anything that's bearing your reality, the next captain of this team, you probably get asked this a lot. Is it Dylan Larkin? Should it be Dylan Larkin? Because I have some real concerns about not Larkin versus somebody else, but just picking Larkin at all. This is a guy that was very immature coming up. I don't know how much your experience bears this out, but we've talked about it in the past on this show where had a reputation for partying, showing up to practice, 2 seconds before, just making it. I don't know if you've heard any of this stuff. I saw him personally.
I've only been on the beat for 2 seasons.
I know, but you're around it. I've heard in the last year or so, he's like completely buttoned up. But I wonder, is that the next captain when you think, not to be a snobby purist, but you think Yzerman, Lidstrom, Zetterberg, Larkin would be the answer that doesn't fit with those other 3. I mean, this is like which one of these doesn't belong. I have concerns, not that captain is a little bit overrated anyway, but I have concerns. Do you think he is the guy and should be the guy?
Yeah, I think he is the guy and should be the guy because he is the guy. Like, he's a guy who, you go through the locker room and you want to know, who do you go to after they get run off the ice, who's going to give you the best explanation for it, and it's Dylan Larkin. And when I got onto the beat, I was a little intimidated by Larkin because it was my first full-time beat. This is your beat. You own this. And he was kind of the guy who everyone looked to. And it was like, okay, well, how do I approach this guy and ask him for this or that? And so that was an interesting process. But in 2 years, I feel like I did a story with Dylan toward the end of last year where we just talked about what is the effect of a season like this on you. And I felt like the way that he took the experience and kind of contextualized it and basically was already using it to fuel him. The quote, I think, was like, it's hardened me or something like that. And it was very self-aware. It was very not woe is me. It was very, I have to take this and make me better because what's the other option? Those were kind of the vibes that interview gave off. And I think it's exactly the standard that you want to set. And so, in my opinion, I think he is the guy, and I think he's the guy that they would look to, the guy he sets the tone for them in every practice. Like, he's going all out. So I don't, like you said, I don't have familiarity with stuff you're talking about. I'm also not sure I would let it change my mind that much. I care more about who somebody is than anything else.
And I think he has changed, but it's just a lot of it's personal experience. Some of it's rumors, which I can't talk about because you're getting into slander territory, because it's hearsay. But, I know personally, I saw him out in Royal Oak night before a game his rookie year. He's not 21. You can put 2 and 2 together there. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that because it puts you in a bad spot.
Right.
But I'll say it because I saw it. Look, most of the players do it. We have Colin Coward on the desk here, and he's the guy that we love on our show. Coward always talks about, I don't care if my wide receiver is out partying so much. I don't care if my cornerback is. I don't want my quarterback to be the party guy. The question around Larkin is, do you want your captain to be that guy? Maybe he's not that guy anymore, but those were sort of the whispers early on in his career. We can talk a little bit off the air about his reputation amongst some opponents in his league for being kind of a jackass. And he's... there's some red flags there. I'm not saying absolutely not. I'm concerned.
No, I hear you. I mean, for me, I wrote this today. I want my opponents to think my, top defensive, my top center is a jackass.
That's fair.
I want them to hate playing against my top center, right? I want.
They all hate Patrice Bergeron, and yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want that.
Yeah.
So, I hear what you're saying. I just, in all of my experiences with Dylan, I've talked to many people around him. Obviously in the last couple years. I don't hear very many bad things about him. Now, I know what my job is. I know people can be cautious around me because if they think if they say the wrong thing, whatever, here or that. But, everything I've heard about Dylan makes me say that this guy not only is a leader, but is a guy who sets the standard. And I think those two things go hand in hand. I mean, ultimately what it comes down to, and someone told me this recently, I thought it made all the sense in the world, is that if you're going to be the captain, obviously people think about it as like addressing the room or whatever. And I'm sure there's some of it that goes with it. But the other thing is like, if you're going to talk about those things, you have to be able to go do them, right? Dylan Larkin goes and does the things that you want your captain to tell other people to do, to battle, to play hard till the end. Like he's the guy that in the last minute and a half on, of a loss is the one who, makes it at least like, oh, maybe they're going to cut it to 1 here with the empty net or whatever. Like that's him, Anthony Mantha is their best scorer, but in the last minute and a half, who's more likely to score you a goal? I think it's Dylan.
Yeah, I think Mantha's the best talent too. I think Wings fans.
He's a 6'5" power forward.
He's
right.
a freak.
Yeah.
I think Red Wings fans, and this is a separate conversation, but I think Red Wings fans overrate Dylan Larkin. Like I watch probably way too much hockey, frankly, but when I watch around the league, like if that's your 1C, your top line center, you're not winning shit. Like nothing. You disagree by that.
I do, and this is what I wrote today. Like it's like you look at who the 1Cs are on the champ. Okay, there's Crosby and there's Backstrom, and those guys are Crosby and Backstrom.
Yeah.
But half the time it's Kopitar, it's O'Reilly.
Kopitar's a much better player at his peak than Dylan Larkin.
But Dylan's 24 and he's on the rise here.
Yeah, Andrzej Kopitar at 24 was much better than Dylan.
And he was in a better situation. But granted, Kopitar at 24, I'm not going to argue that it was better than Larkin. But what they are is it's the profile. It's not the guy who scores. Doesn't have to be the guy that scores 100 points. It's an elite two-way center. Ryan O'Reilly, to me, is the perfect example of if Dylan becomes Ryan O'Reilly, or at least has Ryan O'Reilly's level of impact as a two-way player, then you can win the cup. But you got to have a Braden Shen and an Alex Pietrangelo and a Colton Parayko and a Vladimir Tarasenko. He's not going to win it for you himself, but you can win with that guy because he's your two-way defensive center, and all these teams have it. Go down the list for the last decade. You got to go back to like 04 or whatever it is, Lightning, to find a team that didn't have like a guy who was like a top 20 Selke getter.
Yeah,
Again,
you're not wrong, but you do have to have those supporting pieces in place.
No question, no doubt. I'm not saying they can do it next year.
No, I know, but I'm with you. Like Bergeron, Crosby has said, I don't know if he's ever said it on the record, but I know he said it kind of off the record, that Patrice Bergeron is like the hardest player for him to play against.
Yeah.
Like he's not like 100-point guy. I mean, he puts up points, but he's never been top 10 and, going for the Maurice Richard.
Like 4 Selkies though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's unbelievable. Exactly. So I'm with you on that. I'm not saying Larkin needs to be a 40-goal, 50-assist guy. I'm not saying that. I know that. I just don't think Zetterberg was never that guy either, say for 1 or 2 years. And I think Zetterberg was a much better player than Larkin's like ceiling is. So, and Zetterberg wasn't that 100-point guy either. So I just don't see it. I think he's a good second line on a good team. And that's a separate argument from the captain. But
I think it's a good conversation. I've had this conversation before with people where it's how many teams is he the 2C on? It's probably 15, maybe 20.
I have to look at it. Yeah.
That
sounds about right.
But if he's on those teams, they're like top 3, top 4 teams once you add them to it, right? So, of course, if you're the Red Wings, you should want to have Shane Wright. You should want to have a center better than Dylan because it's going to make you really, really good. But I think, again, I'll come back to the St. Louis mold. If your top 2 centers are Dylan Larkin and Braden Shen, I think you have a shot with the right talent around them, But it's not Crosby and Malkin.
No.
Everyone wants Crosby and Malkin. But again, we've talked about this with the lottery. 1 and 2 pick. If you're not getting a 1 and 2 pick, you're not getting Crosby and Malkin.
1 and 2 pick in the right year.
Consecutive drafts.
Yeah,
in the right year. Yes, exactly.
Right. No, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
This is the thing that blows my mind, and it's one of the most crazy statistics in all of hockey. That the Detroit Red Wings have not had a single 40-goal scorer since Marian Hossa scored exactly that many in that ill-fated 2009 season where they should have won, but half the team was in the infirmary. To go over a decade, there have been some bad teams. Even Zibanejad for the Rangers, they weren't bad, but I mean, they were a sort of a fringe team. He rolls out of bed and scores 41 goals in 56 games, out of nowhere. I mean, he was good, but nobody saw that coming. The fact that they have not had a single 40-goal scorer in more than a decade when some of those teams were actually good. I mean, had good players. Fascinates me. The reason I bring this up to transition is I thought they had, finally, that 40-goal guy, the next 40-goal guy, the first since Marian Hossa over a decade ago, when they drafted Filip Zadina 6 overall in 2018. He was not supposed to be there. I would have taken him. I cannot kill anybody for taking him. He was a consensus 3, maybe 4th best prospect at worst in that draft. But if you ask the analysts, obviously the general managers thought differently. Ends up going 6th. Not going to kill Ken Holland. There's plenty I could kill Ken Holland for. That one I won't. But you look at his comparison to who went right after him, Quinn Hughes. You can always play this game. I'm not going to just sit here and play hindsight, but it is something that makes you want to stab your eyeballs out. Whereas Zadina goes 6 overall, same age as Quinn Hughes, who goes 1 pick later at 7 to Vancouver. The stats are what they are. I mean, 37 games played for Zadina, 73 for Hughes, 18 points for Zadina, 56 for Hughes. And honestly, numbers go in one ear and out the other, especially if you're just listening to this. But to put this in perspective, if you look at the projected award winners, the gambling odds, which again, I'm a gambling guy, this is what I talk about, Max. You go to OddsShark, you go anywhere else. Filip Zadina is not on the watch list for anything, for 0 awards whatsoever. The Hart Trophy on OddsShark goes like 75 or 80 names deep. He's not mentioned on any of these lists. Whereas you go across 1 pick later to Quinn Hughes, again, same age for Vancouver. He's the 6th most likely to win the Norris this year. And it's actually only like a couple spots behind whoever the favorite is. I can't remember who they have at number 1. Point being that Quinn Hughes, 21, is a number 1 bona fide franchise defenseman. I don't expect Zadina to meet that 40-goal expectation. I've already bailed. But you watch this guy every day professionally. He doesn't seem to be fully engaged. Is it too early to call him a bust? Do you still have hope for Zadina panning out to some extent?
Yeah, and it goes to what you just said, the engagement. It's been way up for the last 2 weeks, more than I saw it
This
previously.
is big. This is interesting.
Now, I don't know if you got to see the stream of the scrimmage last night.
I did not.
He had 4 or 5 takeaways in that game, in that scrimmage alone. Now, he's playing against the Red Wings, right? And so that's the problem there, is it's an inner squad, but he strips to Kaiser, going back, comes in and creates his scoring chance. It's real progress. There's no way around it. Like, I think he went and played in the Czech league at all fall in order to stay on the ice, and as Jeff Blashill put it, like, it's not a cutesy skill league, really. Like, it's a hard league. They're going to hit you, and he took some hits while he was there. I think he also learned a lot about playing that back check game where you pick a stick and then you're going up the other way. Do I think he's going to be a 40-goal scorer? No. And I did on draft night too. So I was right there with you. I thought that was a home run pick.
Yeah.
But do I think he can be 30? Yeah, I think he can be that.
And that's a great pick. At 6?
Right.
I mean, great pick.
Now, is it every year? I don't know. Like, is it 25 to 30 most years? That sounds right to me. Is he going to unseat Anthony Mantha for the top line winger job? I don't think necessarily anytime soon, but you play the matchups right and you get the guys with the right players. I think he can be a part of a winning top 6, but it's not a slam dunk yet either. Like, he still has to go prove it against other teams other than this 2-week camp scrimmage, because a lot of guys have looked good for 2 weeks camp scrimmage. I thought Dennis Cholowski looked like a stud in his rookie year for the first 2 months of the season. And then I haven't seen that guy since.
Really. That guy in Pittsburgh, they ended up trading him to Anaheim. I think Daniel Sprong, where he was just lighting up. I
used to love Daniel Sprong too. Yeah.
Everybody, he was because I was following the Penguins at the time because Jack, my buddy Jack, was there his first year with Pittsburgh. But I was asking him, about the Sprong kid. He's like, oh, he's okay, but he's like the talk of camp. Yeah. He was lighting everybody up, but then flipped the calendar of the regular season. Basically did nothing, pouted, and they traded him for Pettersson.
Traded him, you're right.
So, they traded him for Marcus.
But the reason
Peterson,
I bring
Pettersson.
up Cholowski isn't to dunk on Dennis. It's just that
it's just reality.
We look at things in small samples, and someone might have a great 2 weeks or a great 2 months and whatever. And I'm not writing Dennis off for the rest of his career or anything. I no longer. I thought he was going to be like a top pair or at least top 4 defenseman based on the first 2 months of his career. And then that hasn't panned out.
It's not shitting on him. It's diminished how much stock you put into those small sample sizes in that context.
Exactly. It was. That's how I mean it. It's like it was a lesson for me in you see something, you don't just say, okay, and this is what it is.
Yeah.
These things play out over long periods. So I've seen real improvement from Zadina in these last 2 weeks to my eyes. I still want to see it against Carolina, Chicago, Columbus, Dallas, all these teams that are going to play this year before I say he made this jump, right? And I think a lot of people are going to judge him on production, and I think that's fair because that's what he was drafted to do, is score goals. But I do think if you can be a disruptive winger who creates takeaways, all of a sudden you get Lucas Raymond flooding in here.
Yep.
And you get some of these other players, they're going to have to draft a center at some point here because, like you said, you're not going to win with just one good center. You're just not. You're going to have 2 great centers to win. So you get that flowing in, and all of a sudden, a guy who everyone's talking about lately is Pierre-Luc Dubois because he's, reportedly wants a trade out of there. And so you plug the pieces. And let's just say Red Wings trade their unprotected first-round pick for Pierre-Luc Dubois. I'm not saying that this is like a conversation or anything. I'm just saying, let's say you do that because then it takes the conversation of the draft pick out of there too. Let's say 3 years down the road, your top line is Larkin, Mantha, Bertuzzi, or that's your second line, whatever, and your other line is Raymond, Dubois, Zadina. I think that can be a top 6 of a good playoff team, depending on what else is around them. So all of a sudden, you're like, okay, so I thought Zadina was going to be the star, and maybe now he plays a different role, but I still think he's going to score 50 points a year most years.
If you look historically at guys that go in that range, 6, 7, 8, if you have them pegged, 20 to 30 goals, if the hockey gods just said right now he's going to go 25 every year, 50 points, sign me up. I'm in for that.
And
I'd be fine with that.
I think that's
the talent's there. Right?
You're never going to get that level of Chris Davis's batting average consistency out of this.
Yeah.
But on average, that's about what I think.
You are a baseball fan. Pulling out the Chris Davis.
Well, there you go. 247, baby.
247. That was when things were good. It got to 145.
No, but he had 3 straight years at 247.
Yeah.
The model of consistency.
I'll take Chris Davis in Oakland. Hit this, it was 242 5 years in a row or something like that.
That's what I'm talking about. It was 242. I thought it was 247. But
whatever it was. I don't know.
No, you're right. So it's I think
we're talking about two different Chris Davises. That's why I got confused.
I'm talking about
I thought you were talking about C. Chris Davis, Baltimore.
No. KHRIS.
Yeah, because Chris Davis, the Baltimore one, did have the same thing where it was 240.
Yeah.
But that was when it was good. Yeah. No, you're right. K. Davis.
But you get my point, right? I think on average, 25 goals, 50 points a year. I think that's still a reasonable expectation for what Zadina is going to be through his prime.
Yeah,
and I think that's still a good player, but Quinn Hughes is number 1 defenseman.
But you're seeing I just brought in Hughes to talk about how depressed I am.
Oh, okay.
He's not Hughes. Obviously, they would trade Zadina for Hughes straight up. We would. They wouldn't. But I'm just curious. And you've answered it now. But I mean, is it too early to bury him? Obviously, you think so.
I think so. Yeah.
The engagement has been the key because to me, the talent's obviously.
He also
there.
wants it. He's another guy. He wants it, and
that's why he'll make it. Then
there's. I think it's body language wise, you can see him get really down on himself sometimes, and that, if anything, is the thing that he probably needs to figure out is how to stay more level. And you talked about Zetterberg earlier. I think of that as his hallmark, is a guy who could stay level through things, right?
Yeah.
But I think what you see is a guy who's hard on himself. I think he wants it.
I'll take that any day over someone that doesn't give a shit. I mean, I think that's actually encouraging. So we'll wrap with this before I move to our speed round. Just in a couple sentences, when does this team get back to Stanley Cup contention? Not saying guarantee they win a cup in 2026, but where you're looking at the board at the Mirage Sportsbook and you see, the Wings are the 6th most likely team to win the cup.
Yeah. 2025 or 2026.
Do you think they get there?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And why? Is it because you like Eisman?
Honestly, how can you say that having a good GM doesn't help that? But it's really more about, it's 2 things. Number one, I think they're in position with where they're going to pick for the next couple of years, no matter what. Even if they have a great year, even if they do everything I said that is going to make them a success this year, they're still going to pick top 10 or 11.
Probably.
You know what I mean?
Their best case scenario.
Exactly. Yeah. You mentioned at the top, the playoffs are okay, you go on a crazy PDO bender and, whatever. You have 13 straight wins that maybe we could talk about it. But until then, it's just probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to be picking in the top 10 for the next 2 years. And then you add that to Raymond and Seider, who I really like both of them. And I think they both go to what we talk about. Raymond is a guy, we talked about wanting it. Raymond wants it. I've talked to everybody in this guy's life growing up for a feature a couple months ago. and he's just the epitome of competitiveness. And that's the guy that I think you really want coming in here. Moritz Seider's a guy who, he's got a lot of kind of leadership qualities to him from what people say. I haven't got to spend too much time around Moritz, but, covering him in Grand Rapids for, 7-8 times. He's a very, you can see that why people would be drawn to him and why he stays level. And he's got the meanness on the ice too, but I digress. So you add those prospects in. You add the GM, who I don't think, it's not that I think he's like a savior or anything, because, this drives me crazy with people about Harbaugh too. Like, I went to Michigan, right? So I lived the Jim Harbaugh is here to save us experience, right? And I was covering for the student paper, and I remember it. And you set yourself up for the worst when you expect one guy to come in and make it right, especially when it's, kind of a homegrown guy like both of those two are, because if they can't do it, who can? If Jim couldn't do it, who can? If Steve can't do it, who can?
Right.
Don't put yourself in that spot. But what I do think is he's a guy who's proven mostly that he's not going to make a big mistake, and he's going to make more positive moves at the margins than negatives. And those are huge. So when he does hit a home run, that's awesome. But don't come in here expecting him to hit 6 home runs and create the Russian 5. Just expect him he's in a good spot. He's got a great cap situation of how it's shaping up, not for this year, but for 2-3 years down the road.
Projecting out.
Right? He's got a good farm system that will get to the great level if they do indeed pick in the top 10 the next 2 years and don't make a big mistake. And then the guys you have in place in the NHL roster are young enough that, you're not going to get the cup when Dylan and Anthony Mantha are in their prime, but you're going to get it when they're 29. You're going to get your crack at least when they're 29, 30, 31, 32,
yes,
which is still old enough to have a huge impact on it. And that's what I think the difference is. If those guys were 28, 29, and you were at this spot in the rebuild, you'd be real concerned. But I think the fact that they're young enough to be here through it all and keep that culture while being that top line and those top guys, those role models, those producers who are backing up what they're saying, is huge. And the fact that they're going to still be young enough to go do it on the ice when Raymond, Seider, Zadina are full-fledged is huge. So that's why I think they can do it. I think they get back to the playoffs in 2023 or 2024, depending on how things go, how quick guys move. And then I think, after you're in the playoffs for a couple of years, you've learned some things. That's when you get into that top 6 or 7 on the Vegas odds. But I can't tell you they're ever going to win a cup because you can never tell if someone's going to win.
No, well, that's why I phrased it the way I did.
Exactly.
That's why I said, no one's going to say, okay, what year are they going to win the cup? That's tough to do.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's not that it's easy, but I think it's reasonable to expect that every so often your team cycles through as one of those 5, 6, 7 most likely to win it.
And
whether or not
the great teams and the great GMs hold that level for long enough until luck shines your way and you hit on it.
Right.
If you can stay in that top 6 to 8 for 6, 7 years, I like your odds.
Yeah.
If you can get there for 2, good luck.
Exactly. This is why you're the best, Max. I mean, you've laid it all out. You've nailed every point, and no surprise because you're the best hockey writer in the state.
Well, that's nice of you to say, man.
Well, you're fantastic. So we move now in closing to our little speed round.
Okay.
Similar to word association,
right,
but not quite. You can say more than 1 or 2 words, but short answers. And it's funny that you mentioned a little man in Ann Arbor named Jim Harbaugh.
Okay.
You're a Michigan guy. Your skin is not bleeding here. Your first question in the speed round, the Jim Harbaugh extension.
Yeah.
What do you think of the Jim Harbaugh extension?
I'm fine with it because I don't know who you replace him with and reasonably expect to do much better. But I can understand people who look at me and say, I grew up in a generation where Michigan never beat Ohio State. I have only one memory of them ever beating Ohio State, and it was when Luke Fickell was the coach in that very weird year. I just don't. If you want to say it's just because I have too low of expectations, that's fine. That might be true.
That's up to you.
I think I'm fine with the contract extension.
It's up to you whether you're fine with it or not, frankly. Yeah. Next one, you had a cup of coffee in Pittsburgh for an internship. This was sort of a pet question on my behalf because I'm considering the Red Wings and the Penguins to be 2 of the best organizations in sports. So who's the better organization? Now, let me clarify. This doesn't mean historically. Yeah. This doesn't mean who has the better team now, because those are two different questions. But just the way they're run, from your understanding, the way the operations are run, how smart they do things on a day-to-day basis. Who's the better organization?
It's a tough question because I never got to cover the Penguins. Like, I covered a development camp, and that
but
was
you cover hockey. You know, you watch the Penguins. You're a hockey guy.
Of course, yeah. And I actually think they're fairly similar organizations to how where the Penguins are at now is probably about where the Red Wings were at in 2011, 2012.
Yes,
aging out. I think they're making the same mistakes that the Red Wings did, which is pushing. But at the same time, I can't fault them, because I think when you have Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, you owe it to yourself to squeeze every last drop of juice out of the orange. And so I can't fault them, but I think they're destined to land the same place the Red Wings are. I think Yzerman's a better GM than Jim Rutherford, but Jim Rutherford, it's no disrespect to him, he's won a ton of cups. I just think, and frankly, I'd love to cover Jim Rutherford, because he seems like
he's the most frank.
He seems like the most fun. Yes. From that standpoint. I think I'm gonna lean to the Red Wings, but they're, like you said, they're top tier organizations.
Yeah, I think the two kind of models for how to run things. Like, they don't go cheap on anything. The players love playing in both places.
I'd add Boston to that group.
I'm not as familiar with Boston.
Well, just you look at what they've done, right? And it's like,
oh yeah,
the way that they've handled, I haven't agreed totally with the Torrey Krugs. Zdeno Chara, I think I'd have found a way to keep, but
especially at that price, it's like guys playing for like $800,000.
Outside of the 2015 draft, I have a hard time finding too much fault with anything Boston's done in the last decade.
All good organizations, and the Wings, as bad as they've been lately, still a hell of an organization. And speaking of the Red Wings and flaws, are you familiar with the red seats at Little Caesars Arena conspiracy theory that's going out there? They roll out LCA about 3 years ago, and they have these cherry red seats.
They're beautiful.
Right. I actually love the look.
Yeah, I love the red seats.
I thought they were such an aesthetic pleaser. I thought it was so fitting for the brand. And they had this issue where they have Piston games, obviously, and Red Wing games where the attendance was extremely sparse, especially for the Pistons, with both of them. And those red seats stuck out like an eyesore, and they end up eventually putting covers on them and then gutting them completely and changing them to black seats. The Ilitch group and Tom Wilson, who just since retired, said, "Oh, we just like the look of the black more. It's just a change in branding." The conspiracy theory is they were so embarrassed, the two organizations, by the empty seats and how glaring, how much they were getting made fun of. Were you familiar with the conspiracy theory, and do you buy it?
Yeah, I'm familiar with this conspiracy theory. I think I buy it.
So do I.
How do you look at those and say that black looks better than that?
That's what they said.
It doesn't. Those were beautiful, and here's all the proof that I think I need to buy it. They kept the seats red in the practice arena.
Yeah, there you go. That's a great point. I mean, maybe it was the same money, but to me, it was so like they were getting. I was one of the leaders of that brigade, but they were getting just ridiculed for what an eyesore it was, which it was. But it's like
I don't even agree. The red pops and it's unique.
No, it looks good.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't look.
Empty seats. You're saying
that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
no. The seats. I'll rephrase. The seats themselves weren't eyesores. I thought they were beautiful. I loved them. But it was a glaring, like a flashlight on how sparse their attendance was. And they were embarrassed by that. And the conspiracy was Tom Wilson, Chris Ilitch, they're full of shit, basically. It has nothing to do with, we think black looks better. You had 10 years to talk about what seats you wanted. The red clearly looked better. So I'm glad that, I thought I was nuts, but that was like a common.
When you look at the ads on what they have in the arena now that they're empty, they're on red backdrop.
See, there you go. See, so you're a buyer in the conspiracy theory. I love it.
I'll buy it.
This will be a big topic, I'm sure, tomorrow with Kyle Mankey from MLive. Stick to sports, the mantra. I'm not going to do a deep dive. This is your speed round, not mine, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Hockey writers, just journalists in general that are covering sports, sticking to sports versus, dipping your toe into politics. I followed you for a while. I have no idea if you're conservative, liberal. I actually happen to like that. But what's your opinion of stick to sports mentality?
I don't like telling anybody what they should or shouldn't talk about. I have strong political opinions, and I can share them with you, or I can not.
That's up to you. But the point is, I have no idea what yours are.
It's fine. I mean, I am of the left, right? But I also just think they're my opinions, and I just don't think I'm that smart. Like I would love to think I'm that smart, and I believe what I think wholeheartedly, but like I don't know, maybe I'm kind of I don't know if it's cowardly or what, but it's just like I am not. I don't know that it's that I don't know that my opinion is simultaneously unique enough and insightful enough that I want to share it with everything. I also change my mind about stuff, and I find that about myself going back to college, that things I really thought really strongly about when I was 18 or 19 are not things I feel the same way about, or at least with the same fervor that I did then, or whatever. They shift. So I have opinions and I believe them, but it's just like I don't know. I can't really explain it, but you're right that I don't post a lot of it. I have a lot of the conversations about it with like my friends and with my girlfriend, and it's a part of my life. But I don't like stick to sports is your question. Like I think if people have something they want to say, it's good for everybody to have the kind of, to have it out there and to hear it. I don't want to be someone who like I read a tweet and I go, I agree with that. Let me find my own way to phrase it. And I'm just making the same point as someone else. And then a year later, I don't know if I agree with that anymore. And then it's just like, it might be self-preservation more than anything in that sense. But I'm not afraid to share my opinions about things like with people who I'm talking to. It's just that I don't know that I'm going to like, bring some unique perspective, number one. And number two, like, when you put something on Twitter, it's there. And what if I change my mind about something and someone has an idea that I think this way about something, and in fact, I think another way about it now. So
it's all fair. I see both sides. Tomorrow will be interesting. That's all I'm going to say with Kyle, because I love Kyle. I think he's a fantastic journalist, but I've like killed him for his Twitter stuff. And I don't tell someone like stick to sports. Like it's not you can do whatever you want. Free country. It's a beautiful thing. I just argue from a strategic standpoint. It's kind of like the Republicans buy shoes thing too. It's like, okay, maybe you dip your toe in once in a while, but Kyle, it's like every day talking about how much he hates Donald Trump. And it's like, look, I didn't vote for Donald Trump either time. I don't like Donald Trump, but like, come on, can you just tell me how Adrian Peterson's looking? So it's like, yeah, you have the right to do it.
But you don't have to like worry about every tweet. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I get it too, because my one thing I will say is I can get very tired of on a Twitter feed. Like it's a unique experience because there's really nowhere else where you're getting that many people's opinion all at once. And so politics on Twitter is a kind of a unique experience in that way, where, you go onto Twitter and, your feed might be designed to give you sports news, and all of a sudden it's like, now I have to hear 800 political opinions in short succession. So I get it. And again, it's not something that I like love about Twitter or anything like that, is hearing everyone's politics all the time. But I also just like, it is still like, we're, like you said, like we're all still like humans and people. And I think, you follow someone on Twitter and you want to hear what they say. And I don't know that you always get to kind of pick and choose what it's about.
So we'll leave that there. Okay. I'm curious for the favorite athlete you've ever covered. Now, this isn't about watching them on the ice or watching them zip around. This is the guy you've covered in the room, friendliest guy, nicest guy, coolest guy. Who was your favorite guy to cover?
Boy, that's a really good one. I really liked covering two different Michigan basketball players. Derek Walton Jr., who I still think is just a really good dude, and was a great. It was great to kind of follow the run that he made in 2017, where there was just so much to him. The other guy is still in college, and I covered his freshman year, and he blew me away with how insightful he was at 18 and just engaged he was at 18. That's Isaiah Livers. So it would be one of those two. Derek Walton, I would give the slight edge to because I covered him like for 2 years, and Isaiah Livers I really covered for one tournament run because I wasn't on that beat. I just kind of jumped into freelance their postseason. But that's a good question. I think both of those guys are really good dudes. And we're great dudes to deal with.
Flip side of that coin, and this is the last one, and then you're home, you're free to leave. The most difficult athlete you've covered. They were a jerk. They wouldn't give you anything. They were difficult in some way. Who was the hardest cover for you?
Let's see.
There's got to be at least one.
No, I'm sure there are. I'm just trying to sort through them here.
Doesn't mean they're an asshole. Maybe they were. If they're an asshole, that makes for a better answer. It makes for more interesting.
I found covering Miggy really difficult.
Cabrera.
Yeah.
Why?
I covered him for one season, so I didn't have much historical rapport with him. He wasn't often kind of present in the clubhouse at media hours, and when he was, the vibes of open to talk were really never there. So I found it hard to cover him or really get any kind of meaningful interactions with him. Now, when he would have his press scrums, I think he's one of the better quotes in Detroit sports when he wants to be. But I just found the year that I covered him, he didn't seem to want to be very much.
He's a weird guy. He'll be extremely gregarious and then very cagey the next week. And he gets, I had Tony Paul in here, has covered him for years for the Detroit News, and I don't want to misquote him because it was 6 months ago that we had Tony in, but he was saying something to the effect of it's kind of hot and cold with Miggy. So your experience is mostly cold, it seems like.
Yeah.
He said he can be salt of the earth, the best interview ever,
yeah.
or he can want nothing to do with you. And he does have certain, I don't know if you ever pissed him off, but he has certain. You might have. Tony said something I can't remember if this was on air or off air, but Tony said something to the effect of there's certain journalists he just doesn't have interest in talking to.
And that might have been me.
I don't know, maybe you looked at him wrong. God knows.
Could be.
Anyway, that's the end. You're out, man. That was awesome.
Thanks for having me, man.
Fantastic. It was great to have you. You got to check this guy out, Max Bultman. I tell everyone to subscribe to The Athletic. You mentioned Craig Custance, who I happen to agree is probably the best national hockey writer.
Yeah, he's great.
Michigan State alum, by the way. He's actually been on this show once. He wasn't in studio. He did dial in. But Craig's a great guy.
I wasn't told that was an option.
It's not an option anymore. That was before we had cameras. So now you didn't have a choice. So I drag everyone out to our little palatial basement studio in Rochester, Michigan.
It is a great studio, though. There's no doubt.
No, I appreciate it. And, we have a lot more to come. Kyle Meinke from MLive is in tomorrow. A lot going on with the Lions. It's crazy. I don't know. They might have a new coach, new GM, all of the above, one of the above by the time we go live with that show. So we'll see. He's going to get you up to date. I recommend everybody go follow Max Bultman on Twitter. It's, let me get this right, M_Bultman, right?
Yep,
Bultman. And honestly, it's a weird season up ahead. It's truncated. I don't know what to expect, but I think Max has gotten me in a little bit better frame of mind, and I think you really laid things out nicely for the audience, so I thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. I hope that I didn't lead you astray, because that's always the risk.
you led the horse to water, man.
That's
I
right.
feel like I have a much better understanding of where they're at, and hopefully our audience does too. I'd love to have you back, maybe mid-season, a couple months. It'd be great.
Sure, we'll make it work.
All right, Max. And no, you can't dial in ever. I want you in studio every time. Thank you to producer Ben Augusta on the other side of the door here, the all great and powerful Oz behind the curtain, doing great work as always. Shout out to Eric Williamson on his couch in his boxers, probably watching the football game right now. Appreciate the audience. We're going to keep rolling. Spiro Avenue, Justin Spiro. Thanks again to Max Bultman. Go subscribe to The Athletic. Seriously, it's $3 a month. It's crazy. They're always on sale. It's the best buy in town. Justin Spiro, Spiro Avenue. We'll see you soon.